Good morning, everybody. It's Elizabeth Croneiss McLaughlin. It's the 13th of March, 2020. This is our first broadcast where I am home alone with my children. They're upstairs right now playing on the iPad. So I just want to warn you all, most of the time, so those of you who are longtime viewers may remember that there was an incident a couple of years ago where my son was homesick and he accidentally tried to run on camera, and there was a whole shenanigans about this. I'm really mindful of the safety of my children, so they all know that they're not allowed to be down here while I'm broadcasting, but I just want to let you all know that we're in uncharted territory here and everywhere else myself, with all of you. And so appreciate your patience as always and your kindness. No matter what happens over the next, 2, 3, 4 weeks. We have a lot to talk about today. I just want to send a lot of love out to all of you. The news has just been breaking so fast and furious at the moment. The thing I just want to say to all of you is that, of course, please care. Please, take care of yourselves. Please be kind. Please follow the instructions of experts. We're here for the duration. And like I said, it's going to be a kind of a wild, wild westy thing here because I've never tried to work from home with my kids around before. And so it's just going to be really interesting to see how this all goes. All right. I want to share a couple of really significant pieces of news that have happened in just the last 5 minutes. We got word that the president in his press conference this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern is going to announce a national state of emergency as a result of the coronavirus. Those of you who will remember the last time he did this, which was like the false and faulty way that he was trying to get around Congress's ability to control the funding for the wall, know that the point of a national emergency is to actually be able to divert funds in rapid order where they're needed. This is actually, of course, as we all know, a legit national emergency at this point. And so this is not a bad thing. I will tell you, I am a little bit confused right now about how this is all being administered. There was some breaking news when I woke up this morning about, new rushes to create tests and efforts to create tests now that will have response times of 2 hours, that the federal government under enormous pressure was finally pushing forward to do that. I have no clarity at this moment in time on who's in charge of any of that. And as I said this morning on Twitter when I saw it, it sounds very un-Trumpian. My sense right now is that there may be some people at the CDC and elsewhere who are just sort of like zooming in and taking charge over certain aspects of this because no one else is. All that said, they need money to do that. And so from the perspective of this upcoming declaration of national emergency, that funding will be available as a result of doing this. I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think we need more of it. One of the things that I mentioned, by the way, this morning is that I would love to see Mike Bloomberg and Tom Steyer put some money in right away to developing makeshift ICU units, mobile testing sites, things like this that desperately, desperately need to be funded right now all over the country. We had news about 10 minutes ago that the Miami mayor has now tested positive for coronavirus after meeting with the president of Brazil. You will all remember that the secretary of Brazil tested positive 2 days ago. Now Bolsonaro, although there is conflicting information out there about this, and let's not forget Bolsonaro is very far right-wing. He has apparently tested positive, but then a second test apparently is negative, and now there's a big debate about whether he's positive or not. The reality is, however, that the Miami mayor has officially tested positive, and I will just remind you all that Bolsonaro and his secretary ate dinner with Donald Trump last Saturday night at Mar-a-Lago. Bolsonaro was sitting right next to the president. So what doesn't make any sense right now is why the president is not in isolation or getting tested. The same, by the way, can be said for numerous other GOP officials. Lindsey Graham's office announced this morning that he had met with a Spanish official who is now tested positive. We have numerous people who have met with Bolsonaro or with his secretary, the secretary of Brazil, rather, who are now in isolation. Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson, who is the chair of the Homeland Security Committee in the Senate, announced this morning that he is self-isolating. So we have a whole series of things happening here around conservatives who have very frequently been in prominent proximity to Trump. And it just doesn't make any sense, and I'm not saying this from the perspective of the life of the president being any more important than the lives of the hundreds of thousands of Americans that are predicted now to be infected. But you would expect that the president of the United States, if he had been exposed, would self-quarantine, just by the way, like Justin Trudeau has done in Canada, because his wife has tested positive now. So the unwillingness to do that is dangerous, obviously, to the president. It's also dangerous to everybody who meets with him. And so my hope at this point is that, for instance, Nancy Pelosi, for the sake of the line of succession, given that we now know that Pence and the president, and by the way, also Bill Barr was exposed, have at this point opted not to segregate, not to self-segregate, self-quarantine, that we have to make sure that the officials who are in the line of succession who need to stay healthy, stay healthy. So there's a lot to be concerned about the way this is developing, even at the highest levels of our government. My concern right now is who in the senior reaches of government has not been exposed. Ivanka has been exposed. We learned this overnight as well. So that means Jared has presumably been exposed. And, you know, all of this at this point should concern everyone from the standpoint of who's going to be running the shop if all these people get desperately, direly ill. You know, they're all within the age range of the morbidity going sky high. So there, you know, other than Ivanka and Jared, of course, there's a lot to really be concerned about here from the standpoint of just even the stability of our government. And I'll just add that, of course, the president's narcissism is obviously at play in all of this. He can't admit any weakness. Part of the reason why he's a germaphobe is because he considers sickness to be weakness. So his narcissism is preventing him from doing the rational and reasonable thing that any other sane human being would do, let alone if they were running a government, and getting tested. So that's obviously something to watch right now. All right, we do, of course, have more labs and testing underway now. That's the good news. Governor Cuomo announced this morning that there is now going to be a drive-up testing site in New Rochelle, New York, which is the site of the biggest cluster right now in the country. They will process approximately 200 people a day. They cannot process everyone. Priority is being given to people in New Rochelle itself. But there are efforts now being made on the local level to really ramp up testing. Somebody asked about why it is that there's not more of this happening on the state and local level. There is actually. So for instance, here in California, a number of research labs have volunteered their labs to process tests. The problem is volume at this point. So for instance, the tests that are being offered now at the universities here in California, they only have the capacity to process something like 40 tests a day. What we need are large-scale mobile testing sites along the lines of what they've done in South Korea and elsewhere, Taiwan, elsewhere, to make sure that the process can be done on an epic scale fundamentally, because that's what we need in this country, and the tests can be completed in short order. The other thing here is that the CDC has to approve the ability for testing labs to do the tests. They have ceded responsibility to New York for that, for New York State. That really honestly needs to happen for every locality around the country, but the CDC hasn't done it yet. And part of the issue here is that we now have stories all over Twitter and elsewhere of people who are showing symptoms, who are presenting at the ER with their local doctor or at urgent care, and they can't get tested. So testing, as we've discussed over the last week, is really at this point a serious priority. And, you know, my hope is that the announcements that were made this morning will push this in the direction of much more rapid testing on a much larger scale in mobile locations where people can just drive up and get tested, because that's really what we need. Hopefully, we will learn more about what this push is going forward to do more tests and to get more labs set up in short order today. We'll see. All right. Someone asked, what if Trump and Pence get sick? Well, you know, here, I will remind you all that the 25th Amendment does not just cover the insanity of a president. If a president is incapacitated, the vice president and a certain percentage of the cabinet can step in. Again, I will also remind you all, many followers of the broadcast over time will remember this, that in the event that, God forbid, because I wish this on no one, the president dies, the vice president assumes the line of succession. The vice president can then nominate a new vice president that has to be approved by 2/3 of both the House and the Senate. That's a hard ask right now, given that the House is controlled by the Dems and the Senate is controlled by the GOP. It would have to be somebody that everybody had a lot of faith in. At this point, if the vice president is then incapacitated, the same process takes place. If both the president and the vice president are incapacitated and there is no one seated in a new vice presidential seat, then it becomes Nancy Pelosi. So there are levels of anticipated lines of succession here that we all need to be mindful of, you know, and I don't want to forget that Nancy Pelosi is, you know, an older woman in the range, and we need her to stay healthy. We just need her to stay healthy. So again, we've really got to be mindful here that the other thing I just want to say here that it really does concern me at this point is that if, God forbid, all these people who have currently been exposed, who are in senior government positions, fall ill, we're going to have a really hard time, in part because so many of these offices have already been gutted. We know that offices within FEMA are just standing empty. Offices within the Department of Homeland Security are just standing empty. All of these senior officials have been meeting with Trump over the last few days, and Pence. So there's a lot of serious concern here about what this means if people don't isolate themselves. Again, there's not much we can do about it at this point if they don't opt to do the right thing, but it's going to be a wild ride from here on out. Just an absolute wild ride. There are concerns, by the way, I should just also add this, that Mar-a-Lago may now be a site of infection. So the other thing to remember here, of course, is that given that Bolsonaro and the Secretary of Brazil had dinner at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday night, there is no question at this point how many other senior government officials who are regularly, have been jetting down to Mar-a-Lago and were there may at this point also have been exposed. And that's leaving aside all the CPAC exposure. So there's just layers and layers of it now to be concerned about. All right, a few words on this isolation that we're starting to engage in right now. And I just want to say that I made the decision to do this yesterday. This was even faster than I had originally anticipated, when a group of moms in my daughter's class got together and basically were like, we're done. And part of that is because of some of the decisions that have been made inside our school system. We did finally get a decision yesterday here that our children would not be penalized with unexcused absences by the public school system if we opted to stay home. So that's really good. I will just say to all of you, though, that the data overnight and over the last few days has made it very clear that the only way that we are going to prevent at this point the overrunning of our healthcare system is if we all start to self-isolate. And so that means pulling your kids from school. Even though children are not getting sick, they are contagious if they have been exposed to the virus. And even though their symptoms may end up being mild, they can spread it to others in the community. So this right now is very, very important. It's a very important strategy for all of us to engage in. And we're all going to be in it together. So a few things that I just want to mention that have come up over the last 24 hours to support all of us who are doing this that you all should be aware of. Leslie Mack, who is, I believe, the founder of Black Women For, who I follow on Twitter, who is just freaking amazing. I have such huge affection for her. She canvassed for Warren all over the country, has started what is now being hashtagged as Netflix and Stay Still every day to support all of our self-containment without creating loneliness and isolation. There's going to be a running movie list of Netflix movies that folks are going to watch together and tweet about together over the course of the day. The schedule for tomorrow is already out. You can find the hashtag Netflix and Stay Still and participate in that online if you would care to. And the great thing about it is that the list that's out there already has some great adult movies on it. It also has like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse if you want to do it with your kids. Purple Rain is on there. Woot! There's a number of movies on there that I'm like, oh wow, I haven't watched that in 20 years. Maybe I'll go watch it. So again, we're going to have to get creative about the ways that we nurture community while we're all going through this and isolated in our homes. The other thing that has been called out repeatedly over the last 24 hours is the issue of what is now being hashtagged as COVID kindness, which is basically really making an effort online. And if you have to be out in the world, for instance, interacting with grocery store clerks and others in very limited ways, to make sure that you are expressing kindness, generosity, patience. It's obviously not the fault of your local grocery store workers that the grocery store is out of toilet paper or anything else. It's also not the fault of your Amazon delivery person that they may be delayed because they're overwhelmed. We have to also remember that online, notwithstanding the fact that this scenario in this primary in the last week, I will remind you all, it's only been a week since Warren dropped out. That's crazy. It has led to a lot of online vitriol. There are really explicit calls right now for everybody to just be kind, in part because so much of our social interaction over the next few weeks is going to be limited to online interaction. So it's going to be more important than ever before that we engage in kindness and patience with one another, that we make every effort to be generous, to give people the benefit of the doubt, to make an absolute effort to just offer love and support to people who need it. And I'll just reiterate to all of you here, it's really incredibly important that we continue reaching out locally to people in our neighborhoods. Again, you want to make sure that people who are homebound have enough food. You want to make sure that people who are isolated, don't have family nearby, know that they can call you and talk to you. It's really important that we help to support and nurture one another online, virtually, as much as we can. And that for those really who are unable to leave their homes because they're at a high risk rate of infection, that we are doing what we can to help support those folks as well. So all that said, we're in for a really long ride here. And I just want to make clear that, there's a lot of mathematical speculation happening right now about how long this is going to take, what our lives are going to look like over the next few months. There's some fairly significant clarity at this point that we are, at this point, probably 12 to 18 months from a vaccine. There are suspicions that even if the virus abates in the summer, that there may be an additional outbreak in the fall. Our lives over the next little while, and not just the next few weeks, are likely to change quite drastically for the next period of time. And we may emerge from this a very different country than what we were when we went in. I've tried to avoid fear mongering as much as possible. I've tried to avoid panic. There are some very educated medical professionals out there right now who are predicting that based on the current death rates, as many as 1 million Americans could die from this, which is terrifying, just absolutely terrifying. So I just want to say to all of you, I'm going to be here. We all need to be there for each other. We don't know how long this period of self-isolation is going to last. Obviously, it's going to have a really significant impact on all of us, including and especially our children. And we're going to need to keep motivating each other to keep going, supporting one another in the ways that we can, finding ways to process the experiences of those of us who are not only isolated, but also those of us who become infected, because it's happening already, even in the last 24, 48 hours, on a much wider scale than we knew previously. It's happening to famous people and politicians. It's going to happen. There are people I follow on Twitter who currently are struggling with it in their own homes and can't get their kids tested. So we're going to have to make sure that we all work together on this. I also just really want to encourage all of you today to get familiar with the symptomology of COVID, because it's very important that you understand not only what is a symptom and what is not, but also that you understand the protocols for reaching out to your doctor if you think you might be infected. There are very specific requests being made right now that you call your doctor first, or you call the ER, or you call your urgent care, that you check in with them about your symptoms before you show up so that we do not overwhelm the system. And obviously, I'm just going to say this, it is incredibly important that you do everything that you can right now to stay healthy. That means sleeping, drinking enough water, doing your best to eat healthy food to the extent that you have it, making sure that you are, if you are able, getting some exercise inside your home. I'm planning on doing things like regular dance parties with my kids so that we can all kind of keep doing that. And of course, I have, the ability to exercise in my own home here with my bike. But it's really important as well that in addition to all the physical health maintenance that we all need to be doing right now, you also maintain your mental health. I'm going to share something that I was kind of hesitant to share, but I feel like I can at least share within this community, which is that last week, coincidentally enough, I had my annual physical. I met with my doctor. She said to me, you're on the front lines of all of this. And, she happens to be a woman of color, best doctor I've ever had, just freaking amazing, very forward on women's health. She said, you're on the front lines of this. You're out here every day dealing with it. You're online 24/7. You're supporting huge communities. We need to keep you healthy. We need to keep you sane. Would you consider doing some anti-anxiety meds again? Which, by the way, I did after I had my kids initially. I had postpartum depression and anxiety. And I said, okay, fine. That feels like a good idea. That, by the way, feels like it has made an enormous difference for me just in the last week of being able to cope with what is an extraordinarily stressful circumstance, even as it is. So if you yourself are struggling in any way, if you are, in high prone anxiety, if you are not sleeping, if you are finding it incredibly difficult to cope with where we are right now, please reach out and seek help. Again, I'm sharing this because I want to model to all of you that, even those of us who are out here trying to kind of lead and coalesce communities need support as well. And you do too. So, again, this is one of the reasons why it's really important that you monitor how you're doing. Panic doesn't serve anyone, and your mental health is directly connected to your physical health. So making sure that you are doing what you need to do to cope is incredibly, incredibly important. And to me, the other thing that I will just say here is that I have long been a proponent. I used to be really opposed to medication. Ever since I got postpartum depression and really experienced it dramatically, and then had the experience of going on Zoloft and feeling like whoosh, everything had suddenly been lifted out of the basement, it's been very important to me to just demystify the fact that seeking mental health care, seeking medication if you are concerned about depression or anxiety, particularly at this moment in time. There is no shame associated with that. There's nothing wrong with it. It is a part of finding ways to survive this, like really finding ways to survive this. It's washing your hands is obviously at the top of the list, but our physical and our mental well-being really depends right now on asking and seeking help when we need it. And so this is just a good and fortunate lesson to everyone at this point, that you need to make sure that you do not wither away in suffering if you are struggling with anything. And for me, many of you know that I had these periods of anxiety where I'm like awake all night. That's not good for anybody right now. I have to stay healthy for my family. I have to stay healthy for my kids. I have to stay healthy for all of you. And so please make sure that to the extent that you are feeling like you need help, like literally now is the moment to seek it. Because the other thing I will say here is that drive-through pharmacies are great, but our pharmaceutical care practitioners are on the front lines of being exposed to people who are going to need medical help. And so now, this is also at this moment like a really critical point to seek support if you think you need it, not only because your access to the medical system is key right now, but also because if you need meds, you want to be able to go get meds. There's also some things here that I just want to share about this, which are really critical, which is that a lot of medications are processed through China. And so part of the issue right now in terms of production is that there are circumstances that are now being reported where certain meds are being rationed to pharmacies, not to patients, but to pharmacies, because the means of production, the supply chain is compromised by COVID. So really important to seek support now if you need it, and do it now rather than later, because we don't know where the supply chain is going to be in the next little while. And please make sure that you're getting a 30-day supply of whatever it is that you think that you need, so that hopefully things are being restored right now in China. Hopefully by the time that we get to the end of that 30-day supply, you've got what you need. And by the way, don't forget about GoodRx, which I just learned about a couple of weeks ago, which gives you coupons for prescription medication that can really discount it if you have to pay out of pocket or if your copay is really significant. So very much just want to encourage all of you to kind of seek the help you need right now. It's just wildly, wildly important on some day. We're doing everything here that we can to really minimize the amount of time that we're exposed to the movers and they're exposed to us. I am planning on being back on the air on Tuesday. We already have internet set up at the new house. I've been running back and forth over there relentlessly for the last few days. So no broadcast on Monday, but I will be doing everything that I can to be live on Tuesday. So please stay tuned to the feed for that. Also, I'm going to broadcast today on Facebook. We're not going to do our regular 5 roundup. We're just going to talk about COVID and coping and strategies and wellness. And yes, the politics of it a little bit, but also really kind of how to maintain and continue on in the face of a fundamentally world-altering moment. So I hope you'll join me over there for that as well. And reminder to all of you, we are still planning. This is a great thing about doing programs virtually. We are still running our Haven program starting April 3rd, 28 days of respite and relief, daily prompts for journaling, thought points, exercises you can conduct, rituals that will help you stay stable and balanced. Really want to encourage those of you who have been through it, who know how wonderful it is, to shout it out. And for those of you who are feeling like you might want something that 5 to 10 minutes a day is really going to help keep you grounded if you are self-isolating for any extended period of time, please consider joining us. GaiaLeadershipProject.com/Haven. There are payment plans available. The first tier is like dirt cheap. It's 2 payments of $59. I know that not everybody can swing that, but if you can, we're doing our best to make it as accessible as we can while still supporting our staff. And much love to all of you. All right. And obviously, as we said at the top of the broadcast, there is this Trump address coming up at 3:00 where he's going to declare a national emergency. Hopefully at that point, we're going to learn a lot more about mobile testing. All right. Much love to all of you. I will talk to all of you here on Tuesday, and I'll hopefully see all of you over on Facebook in half an hour or so. All right. Much love. Bye.